And tonight, why we're all here, I'm going to introduce our speaker, Dennis Mudd, who created Calscape, an online resource that if you're anything like me, you probably use regularly. A few years ago, Dennis gave Calscape over to the California Native Plant Society, CNPS, to bring this outstanding resource to the attention of more gardeners, and it's worked. Calscape is not Dennis's first entrepreneurial venture, and it won't be his last. He founded Music Match, Slacker Radio, and most recently, the Smart Food Foundation, which provides whole foods and nutrition education to 3,500 low-income families in San Diego every month. What prompted his horticultural adventure was buying a home in Poway some 15 or so years ago, and we are going to learn more about this adventure this evening. I personally love following Dennis on Instagram. It's at Dennis Mudd. And where his biking, he's an avid biker, and horticultural adventures are very inspiring to me. Currently, when he's not adventuring, he's working with Cal State on a fascinating project to genetic test a native plant to pinpoint its age in order to learn more about preserving native plants that reproduce slowly. It was so fascinating, I couldn't remember any of the particulars about it. So he'll have to, if anybody wants to know more, he's going to have to give you all that. But so without further ado, I'm super excited to have Dennis Mudd and tonight's talk, Nature Restoration Landscaping.
Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here, and really thanks very much for the invitation. Happy to share the things that I've learned over the years in native plants. Okay, so let's see. I guess I should share screen. All right.
Oh, I got to unshare.
Okay.
Yeah, now try it. There you go.
All right. Is everybody seeing my screen?
It's coming. There. Perfect.
All right. Excellent. Well, this presentation is really about, it's kind of native plant gardening, I'd say. You know, there's a lot of different theories and philosophies of native plant gardening, and what I've kind of evolved to is more of trying to mimic nature as much as possible. So the more true to nature that I've been able to get in my own garden, my own landscape, the more I've enjoyed it. The more butterflies, the more birds, the better the kind of the spirit of the place or the vibe. It's so anyway, I'm going to kind of describe this. And I don't mean to say that this is for everybody, you know, that there's some downsides and some, it's a little bit browner in the summer than a lot of other gardens. But for me, it's a beautiful way of landscaping. And I hope some of you give bits of it a try anyway in your own gardens. Okay. All right. So this kind of started with, I grew up in San Diego, but I've lived different places in the world throughout my life. For me, the genesis of this has really been working crazy hours in digital music startups, and then only, rarely being able to get out on my mountain bike and go out in nature. And for me, nature was just such a lifesaver. I was working 16, 18 hours a day for a decade or so at a time with the different startups that I worked on, and I gradually fell in love with the nature of the area that I lived in, kind of around Poway and in the inland part of San Diego County. And over time, I decided that I wanted my garden to be more like nature, and it was more of a tropical landscape, and I liked it okay, and it was nice and beautiful, but it was nothing like the nature that I was spending my time in. And so the first part of this presentation really kind of describes that process of me going from knowing really nothing about gardening. I was in digital music for the most of my career, and learning about it, making a lot of mistakes, but gradually get to the point where I think I created a really beautiful native garden. It actually won San Diego Home and Gardens Garden of the Year in 2014. So I think it's sort of a proof that not only can it can be true to nature, but it can be very beautiful as well. Okay, so this is the starting point for me, and this was my tropical landscape, very similar to a lot of landscapes in San Diego County. A lot of palm trees, a lot of grass. It used a lot of water. I had a nice little volleyball court, but it really, was not natural at all. And I said, okay, I want it to look like nature. And so this is while I was still working like crazy in tech, and I hired a contractor, and I said, okay, I want it to be native. Put in native plants. And then I went back to work, didn't really supervise it very carefully. And as I learned a little bit more what was going on, I found that really there was not a single California native plant. I guess it was native to some places, but those places were far, far away in Australia and South Africa. A lot of these were actually invasive plants, especially the African feathergrass. It's I'm still pulling that stuff out to this day. But as I got a little more time, I said, okay, this is not what I want. I need to spend a little more time and try and work with contractors to figure that out. And the next thing I got was, I hired people that are really focused on native plants, but they ended up putting in what turned out to be cultivars for the most part, and they're beautiful, but they were selections mostly from Central California, some from Northern California, more from the coast. Almost none were selections from plants that actually, or plants that actually were native, truly native to the part of San Diego County that I lived in. But I kind of got past that because the flowers are so beautiful. I mean, you look at these Ceanothus concha, and I said, all right, I can live with this. But unfortunately, they didn't live very long. And it's not surprising, because as I got to learn more about native plants, I realized that plants that are growing in areas that they don't naturally belong are often very short-lived no matter what you do. And I tried all kinds of experiments, less water, more water, different places, but I spent a lot of time going with a chainsaw, cutting down dead Ceanothus and various other dead shrubs, and carting them off to the dump. So I said, okay, really what I want something that really looks like the nature that I am riding my bike through around Poway. And I don't want to be going to the dump all the time. So I did a lot of research to try and figure out what are the plants that naturally belong where I live. And that was sort of the impetus behind Calscape as well. As I did all this research, I wanted to systematize it a little bit. There's a lot of data that's available, and I'll talk that a little bit more, that makes it possible to estimate the geographic ranges of all the different 8,000 or so native plants that are native to California, and figure out which ones are native to every square mile. So anyway, I'll talk to that in a bit. But as I put in the plants that really belong in Poway, I saw, okay, this I recognize. I recognize this from my bike rides. And even better, I'm starting to see lots more birds, lots more butterflies, many more insects that I'd never seen before. It got to be something that I just had a thrill just walking through and seeing what really felt like real nature. Not just a beautiful garden, which is nice, but real nature, which just for me is something that just brings me incredible amount of joy as I sit in it and I enjoy it. And best of all, it was super easy. So I didn't really do very much work at all. I didn't have to trim things. I didn't have to weed. I didn't have to do much of all. I just let nature do the work as I went to more and more of a biomimicry approach towards managing this landscape. Okay, so that kind of gets me to the principles that I gradually moved to about this nature restoration concept of landscaping. And it all comes down to mimicking nature as much as possible. And there's 5 areas where I try to mimic nature and that I want to call out, and I'll describe in a little bit more detail. One is, as I've been talking about, choosing the plants that naturally belong in the spot that you are growing them, not just within the kind of the square mile or the general geography, but also in the right sun, slope, soil conditions. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But then once those are in, using natural irrigation methods, or at least biomimicry irrigation, natural weed control, natural mulching, and natural pest control. And I'll talk about all those as time goes by. But first of all, plant selection. And there are, as I said, there are about 8,000 plants that naturally grow in California. Only about 700 of those are, on average, I'd say, going to grow in any square mile in the state. So look at Calscape. In my square mile, there's about 750 plants that grow. So that's kind of, I'm throwing out 90% or so of all the plants that are possible. And I start with a much smaller group. From there, I want to make sure that plants that require a little bit more moisture are going to be in areas that naturally have a little bit more moisture. Either they're near creeks or north-facing slopes or aspect or kind of hillsides that just tend to have a little bit more moisture. Have the same drainage conditions, the sun conditions, and just also same ecological relationships with other plants and other insects and birds that I'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay, but weather is a very big part of it. And as I learned more about the kind of plants that grow in different conditions, I realized that the concept of a California native doesn't really make all that much sense. So plants don't care about political landscapes, where our state lines are drawing. And within our state, we have wildly different precipitation levels, summer temperature, winter temperature, summer humidity. The coastal areas are very, very different from areas that are just a few miles away. So you really are, if you're growing a plant that belongs right on the coast or within a couple miles of the coast, 10 miles inland, there's a really good chance that it's not going to live very long. So this shows one example of what we did with Calscape. And it's interesting that because of the California Consortium of Herbaria, it's the university system herbaria that are from universities for the most part in California, but even broader. They share an incredible number of vetted observations from biologists in the university system around the state. Been collecting these observations of plants for since the mid 1800s in a lot of cases, and with that, we're able to create a plant range map for every one of these 8,000 plants in the state of California. And then we use the weather conditions in every square mile, as well as the weather conditions where we know the plant grows to extrapolate the likely plant range. And this shows the likely plant range of Penstemon spectabilis or showy penstemon. And so you say, my house is that little red star there, that it's likely that plant is going to be a good fit for my plant. So I can say I want plants that have purple flowers, and well, actually I'll talk about it in a minute, but this will be a good starting spot for this one. You can't just say, okay, every plant that grows in my square mile is going to grow in my yard, because you need the ones that have the right soil exposure, soil drainage, and dry season soil moisture for them, in particular. And soil moisture and soil drainage are probably the biggest things that if you're going to plant a native plant that doesn't like clay that needs fast drainage in flat clay soil, it's probably going to die. So for every one of the different plants in Calscape, or I can't say everyone, but most of them, we put in information about the drainage requirements, whether it needs fast drainage, slow drainage, or whether it can handle all kinds of drainages. So that's definitely something to look at in Calscape. And then another one is, I'll just talk about soil moisture for a second. That for the most part, California you don't have that many flat spaces. So you have all different kinds of slopes, north-facing slopes, east-facing slopes, slope bottoms, which tend to be riparian zones, south-facing slopes, which are very, very dry. And different plants will grow in each of those different sort of conditions. So again, as you look and see what kind of soil you have and how dry it gets particularly in the dry season, whether you want to plant really dry. A plant can tolerate very dry soils like buckwheat here in the lower left-hand corner, one of the best plants for very dry soils. Or if you have a riparian or north-facing slope, you can grow plants that require that like a lot more moisture. They tend to be some of the more chaparral kind of plants, particularly in California. And so this slide here shows the advanced search in Calscape that I can say, okay, I want plants that are native to my location, I want shrubs, I'm going to plant them in a sunny condition. It's going to be kind of on a slope, let's say, so it's a fast sandy soil. but it's going to be quite dry still, very easy, and also grows at my local nursery that I like to shop at, Moosa Creek. And it'll show you these 27 plants, and then you can read more about them and add them to a plant list, and that can be the creation of the plants that you're going to put in your new landscape design. So I find this very useful for I found this very useful for putting my own landscape plan together, and I hope other people find the same thing that's useful for you as well. Okay, so let's get to irrigation. And irrigation for native plants, I think, is the primary reason why people end up killing their native plants. Because like a lot of people say, well, if it's native to Poway or native to my location, it should be able to handle natural rainfall, right? And so I don't have to water at all. Well, that's not going to be true for a lot of the coolest plants that you can actually, grow. A lot of the shrubs evolved to grow in like slope bottoms or north facing slopes or areas that are kind of closer to creeks, and that they need a little bit more moisture than you're going to get on a kind of a flat area with that is going to be very naturally dry in the summer. And so before I go on, I just want to say, there's a kind of a question is, well, why can't you just use regular irrigation then and irrigate them a little bit, just like you do with most plants? I mean, just regular garden plants, you turn on the sprinklers and they look great. And if they need more water, you just give them more water. And the problem is that this will actually often kill mature native plants, especially after they've been around for 2 years or so. If you water in the summer, they could die. You might lose your entire garden with a summer watering. I've done it myself. And the question is, why does this happen with California native plants, but it doesn't happen with most regular garden plants? And it's about the mycorrhiza, the fungus that lives in the soil that California native plants really need to live in to be able to get through a drought system. And really, it's not just the mycorrhizal fungus, it's the overall complicated microbiome that's in the soil, this balance of bacteria and mycorrhizal fungi and various other microorganisms. And California natives never evolved, and the biomes that live in the microbiomes that live in the soil around California native plants never evolved to be able to handle wet, warm conditions. Because California, 90% of the people that live in California live in a chaparral sort of environment or Mediterranean environment where it doesn't rain except very, very rarely when it's hot. It rains in the rainy season from like late November through April. So you got 7 or 8 months a year where it's bone dry, where it's not going to rain at all. And that's just what these California plants evolved to live in. And if you water the soil with a fair amount of water when it's hot, what you see is the mycorrhiza dies. You'll very often see bacteria or pathogen blooms that will kill the bacteria, attack the roots, and you'll have a lot of plants that are dead. So unfortunately, it makes it reasonably difficult not difficult, but it makes gardeners have a different approach when it comes to California natives. And what I evolved to is really a biomimicry approach to irrigation. That if you look around, you see that areas that are kind of green all year round in California native landscapes, they're very often near a creek. And what they do is they'll reach their roots out to a creek, and they'll pull water laterally from the creek, or if in a garden in a irrigated area that's not too far, and it brings it into the chaparral environment or other plants, and then basically the roots of interconnected roots of the different plants will continue to pull the moisture away from the creek and share it across the entire the landscape. See, the same thing happened with deeper root plants. that there's been a lot of research that deep-rooted plants like a lot of shrubs and particularly trees reach their roots way down into deeper moisture, pull the water up to the surface level, and then also that moisture is shared across the different plants in the landscape. Okay. And this is they're doing a lot more research about root systems in natural environments. Particularly dry natural environments. And it is actually very different than garden environments, where I think you see that a lot of garden environments that get regular surface water never need to evolve deep roots. But in nature, all the surface water is kind of gone during the course of the summer. And so plants really have to put their roots out very deep as well as very wide. Okay. And you see that oak trees can have, this is actually not the depth, this is the breadth. That a lot of these trees and other shrubs can reach way out to riparian zones, many feet away, and they actually get quite wide. And the same thing with depths. Oak trees 80 feet deep. Engelmann oak 65 feet deep. Even rabbit brush and sagebrush can get roots that are 10 to 15 feet deep. And I was just amazed at some of the amount of water that large oak trees and other different plants can pull up to the surface levels every day. They've done research with maples. So they've found sugar maples can deliver up to 40 to 60 gallons of water every night. When they close the stoma of the leaves, the water is not able to transpire out the leaves, and it actually will deposit 40 to 60 gallons of water in the upper soil layers every night, which the surface roots can get access to the next day, as well as the roots of other less deep sort of plants can get access to the next day. Smaller shrubs like big basin sagebrush can deliver up to a quart of water to the surface each night. And it makes a big difference that if you've got a handful of very deep-rooted plants or even moderately deep-rooted plants, they can bring a lot of water up to the surface every night and kind of share it with the other plants in the gardens. One of the most spectacular examples of what's going on is they've measured actually the amount of water that a big oak tree can transpire over the course of the year, and they estimated there was about 40,000 gallons of water would come up from the roots and then transpire out through the leaves of the plants over the course of a year. So it's amazing. It's an incredible natural underground irrigation system that moves a lot of water laterally from riparian areas as well as up from deeper rooted areas. And that's really what I tried to mimic with my sort of a system, where I have no more sprinklers, regular sprinkler systems. What I have is bubblers that will create a relatively small number of wet areas. And it'll be up to the plants to reach their roots out to those wetter areas. So this shows a couple catch basins. There's a natural creek at the bottom of my property. A lot of oak trees, or moderate amount of oak trees, I guess, that are reaching roots down, I think, quite deep and pulling up the water. So, but between deep-rooted plants reaching the roots down and wide-rooted trees and plants that are, reaching out to irrigated areas and riparian zones, I'm able to bring water out into the entire landscape so that all the plants get a little bit drier. Get a little bit of extra water. So this kind of just illustrates some of these things. The seasonal creek at the bottom of the property, a fake bioswale, and I've got bubblers in this fake bioswale that actually also captures a fair amount of water during the rainy season. Some oaks that have grown really quite quickly over the last 15 years or so that are bringing up a lot of underground moisture. And then these various designated riparian areas that are irrigated by bubblers, a lot of bubblers that are quite close to the house that plants can reach their roots out to. But again, no direct irrigation of any except the riparian plants. Okay. All right, so next is mulching. And mulching is another area that I think, oh, excuse me just a second. Mulching is another area where I think that there's a lot of argument in the native plant world, but a lot of native plant landscapers will put down tons of heavy layers of mulch. And what happens is the mulch, it really soaks up the rainfalls and even light irrigation. So hardly any moisture actually ends up getting through the wood chips or the heavy mulch to the soil. So what I found is really best is adding rocks is great. It helps keep a little bit more moisture in the soil, and it protects the soil from the sun so that more water stays there for longer. But after that, rely on the natural leaf litter. And you can see the leaf litter, it's really kind of brittle and it doesn't soak up a lot of water. So the water just kind of goes right through the leaves. The leaves on the ground shade the soil, but it also allows the soil to breathe. And it's just more the natural way that mulch is deposited in a natural landscape. Okay, natural weed control. So this is also a very big topic of discussion. But what I've found is that the best way to control weeds is not to water the plants, just to do these small number of riparian areas. And once I stopped watering large areas, weeds stopped growing. So the water is the ground just gets too dry in the summer for weeds to be able to make it through. Also, it helped to be able to grow plants fairly close together. What happens is the plants will connect their roots, and in the interconnected area between the roots, the mycorrhizal fungus grows, and the mycorrhizal fungi has been demonstrated to actually secrete chemicals that keep the weeds under control, that will kill the weeds. That's why in pristine natural areas you never see any weeds, or it's quite rare. But definitely, I think it's very important to not use Roundup, because if you do use Roundup, it seems to kill the mycorrhiza, and then the weeds come back faster than ever when very, very quickly. Okay, rodent control. So this is one of my favorite parts of having a natural landscape, is that I ended up realizing how cool it is to have mice and chaparral rats and those are the primary food of the raptors that became extremely common in my property. So I also have coyotes that will come in every once in a while, but the raptors are really the coolest part of it. And now I like seeing chaparral rats and I like seeing mice, because I know that they're going to be able to support more of the hawks and owls. And if you do feel like you've got too many rodents, just wait until the raptors come, because just a single adult owl or hawk can eat 100 pounds of rodents in the course of a year. So what I really have, in the beginning, it took a little while for it to get under control, but before too long, there weren't too many rodents. They weren't really hurting the plants very much. There was some depredation of the plants, but nothing that was really a problem. The plants would grow back pretty quickly, and between the rodents and the snakes and the coyotes and everything else, nature got into balance pretty quickly. And this is a really cool picture I took of a family of great horned owls. They that nested on a tree just outside of the garden, and they actually got kind of tame. They would come over and they would do call and response to us as we were drinking wine on the patio. It was really, it was quite nice, and they stayed for at least 2 years, and before they started, felt like most of them moved on. And a red-tailed hawk even came into the living room. That's not a great picture, but you can see the red-tailed hawk was surprised. It was just sitting on the couch, tried to go out the wrong window, quickly sussed up the situation, and did 3 flaps out the other window and was gone. So sometimes nature can get too close, but I think it's kind of cool. Insect control is also a significant issue. And early on, I actually used insecticide to keep the aphids under control. I had no idea how effective until I stuck with a biomimicry strategy, that having natural insect control would actually work. Now I have so many insect predators. Between spiders, they're really the champions of kind of the beneficial insects that eat more insects. So spiders will eat more insects than all the other bird species combined, and I have a lot of different spiders. But it actually really does work, and I have very limited. Just sorry. All right, come on. No. Dog wanted in, then dog wanted out. Okay. I had no idea how much the insects would actually, these beneficial insects would actually keep things under control. And then birds and bats, of course. So one hummingbird can eat over 100 insects per day. And so what I see is tons of hummingbirds. And a lot of times they'll just be zipping around the sky, and I'll see they're actually just eating insects out of the sky, just getting gnats one after another. Bats, swallows, see so many different birds. And what I found is that, according to the research, that birds actually, actually, there's a different slide, never mind. Okay, so this just shows some of the different insect species in my garden. So the butterflies are some of the most exciting to be able to see. There's dozens of species of butterflies now in my garden. And as I said, the plants really are no longer under serious threat from the insect herbivores that are in the garden. And I actually thought that, particularly with having a pond, and I'll show you that in a few minutes, that I would have a lot of gnats or there would be too many bugs, that I really don't see bugs or insects that irritate humans anymore. By having enough insect predators and the bats and birds, they're able to keep all those insects under control. So and I get less mosquito bites and less gnat problems than I ever did before putting in a pool or a native garden. So just show some of these are pictures of butterflies I took in pictures I took in a single day, or sometime in the late spring, I think. So it's amazing to see all these butterflies show up, and in part that's because 90% of insect herbivores, that includes caterpillars, they only evolve to be able to eat the leaves of a small number of native plant species with which they evolved. So they normally are not going to be able to eat the leaves of the native butterflies anyway, are not going to be able to eat the leaves of non-native plants. So I guess it's good for the non-native plants, but you're not going to see this incredible variety of butterflies and other cool insects growing in your garden that you would if you planted a broad range of native plants. And these ones, like the one in the kind of the purple one, is a morning cloak that only eats the leaves of oaks and willows. This Lorcan's Admiral only eats the leaves of various different native willow species. I can't remember. Let's see it. And I can't remember some of the other ones, but actually in Calscape, you can look up any one of these different plants and it'll tell you the butterfly species that are associated with each of them. So you can actually pick the plants for the butterflies that you want to be able to live in your garden. Okay. And butterflies are great, but really you also see, because we have so many insects, we're able to have so many different birds. And this is another thing that I learned as I learned more about native plant landscaping, is that 96% of terrestrial bird species depend on insects to feed their young. So if you don't have many insects in your garden, you're not going to be able to have many bird species. And Doug Ptolemy, just an amazing entomologist and biologist from the University of Delaware, wrote a great book called Bringing Nature Home. Did a lot of research on this and just showed that areas that had a fair number of native gardens or native spots had massive numbers of birds relative to the areas that just had non-native plants. So and I can tell you firsthand that the number of bird species that we have in our property is just phenomenal. So my wife and I will crack a bottle of wine and sit out in the patio and watch the bird show just about every night. And it's truly amazing. I think we have more birds in the in our few acres of property than any place I've ever seen before. So if you like birds, you like butterflies, think about planting a lot of natives. Okay, so let's see. So let me get to the pool and pond because I thought that we had done a good job of attracting birds and butterflies, but it wasn't until Judy Lintzer, I think is on the line somewhere, convinced me to turn my pool into a pond that I realized how much biodiversity that I could actually add. See that there's a picture of the pond before I started going, and it really didn't fit with the natural landscape. And these pictures show what it looked like after. All I did was stop chlorinating it, took the filter out of the equation, and just planted a lot of plants and just had water flow through the different plants. And really quickly, the water got very, very clear. Let's see if I can show this video. So these are I put in a lot of, not a lot, but a handful of bass and bluegill and crappie, some minnows, lots of frogs, and the water is just amazingly clear. This is kind of a system that's in balance. I don't feed the fish anything. They just eat the mosquito larvae and dragonfly larvae and all the other little things that are growing in the pool. But it's really, it feels like a pond, even though it really is a pool. This is a picture of the ducks, of 2 wild ducks coming in, thinking to see, they're going to see if I think this is a good spot for them to have ducklings, but I think there were too many fish in it for them. The fish were very interested in the ducklings. They left fairly soon, but we have all kinds of aquatic birds that come and check out the pool and pond. So blue herons and snow egrets. We've had night herons and green herons. It really is kind of, it has absolutely supercharged the biodiversity of this little area that we have. Okay. And what I tell people, if they can't add a pond, add a plant filtered fountain. That's probably the epicenter of the birds. I'd say there's so many birds that come to this little fountain that I stopped putting chlorine in. I just put a bunch of plants in the fountain, and we see every morning there'll just be a train of birds coming and taking a little bath in this plant filtered water. This is maybe. The first ones that come in the morning are almost always the hummingbirds. Alan's hummingbirds come in and Anna's hummingbirds come in, but sometimes we'll see a dozen hummingbirds that'll just be out having a big old pool party and really enjoying themselves. And all I did was, this just has Marsh Pennywort and a maidenhair fern, and I guess at this stage that's all, and then the seat monkey flower as well. Those are the plants that are in there, and the water is just being filtered by the plant roots. Okay, so it really can. I'll just show you some pictures of what a natural garden can look like. I think it really is quite beautiful. This is the front yard. Spectacular showy penstemon with Cleveland sages. The red flower up here in the upper left corner is monkey flower. A lot of manzanitas and oak trees. In the upper right-hand corner, it's different kinds of ceanothus. Ceanothus tomatosus is the blue one, and varicosas is the white one. In the bottom, you see these are more front yard pictures. We can see that there really is what I tell people is there's a fine line between a restored natural garden and an abandoned house. So you have to make sure that the hardscape looks nice. So I put in nice tiles and some nice rock work. And I think it does. It looks natural, but it still looks quite beautiful. It shows in the lower right-hand corner that seep that collects a lot of the different groundwater that I irrigate in the summer. You see these plants are reaching their roots out to it, so they stay just a little greener all year round, which I think particularly in San Diego is important, even just for fire reasons, that you don't want to let your plants get too brown and be too much of a potential fire hazard in the summer. More pictures of the backyard. There's a willow up here in the upper left-hand corner that just was a volunteer that grew in a planter that I had for a jacaranda, and I just trained desert grapes, and I think there's a trumpet vine, a non-native trumpet vine that's growing through it as well. But it's really makes a beautiful canopy for the side of the yard. This shows another picture in the upper center. It shows a picture of the new fountain with different kinds of plants that are growing in, and just water is quite clear. and just various other pictures that shows a lower backyard with a lot of oak trees and Cleveland sages. And just the vibe of it has gotten to be quite beautiful, and it's just a pleasure to sit out and watch the birds and feel like you're part of nature. More pictures of the pool. Lower center, you can see that a lot of seep monkey flower is growing in the far side of the pool, and it just in the spring and early summer, it just turns a beautiful, beautiful yellow, and there's just incredible blooms everywhere. All right, and this is just kind of to show that you don't have to have a large house with a large budget, because this is my son's house in Claremont, and it's just a small garden. He's kind of on a canyon, but he's planted a bunch of different sages and Delmar manzanita, and it's a beautiful, beautiful garden. These are also using the same philosophy that I have of just planting plants that naturally belong in the area that you live. Okay, so I really got into native plant gardening just because it's good for my soul, and I just love to be in nature, and it was kind of good for me and made me happy and made my wife happy and other friends that came over and visited happy. But I also and one of the reasons why I created Calscape is because I do think it's becoming a more and more important way that we can prevent the loss of biodiversity in our state. That with growing development, we're just seeing massive numbers of localized extinctions, even total extinctions of plants and animals. And especially in the western half of the state, and especially in Southern California where we live. So if we really we get together and a lot of us create little pieces of nature in the developed part of the state, we're going to be able to slow down and hopefully even reverse this process of loss of biodiversity in the world, in this part of the state, and hopefully in the world as well, as more and more people around the world see the benefits of restoring nature just in their own little areas. So I'm hoping that I can convince people to do it for themselves, but also to do it to play a part in slowing and reversing the loss of biodiversity in the world. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much.
Oh man, the questions are flying in. So start out by telling us, how big is this property?
So I have two properties. One is the front yard is small. It's, I don't know, like a 1/16 of an acre, an 1/8 acre, or something like that. The backyard is probably about 1.5 acres. And then I also, luckily, I saw somebody who was going to try and develop the lot behind our house. So I bought about a 5-acre lot that's just a canyon. And so it's undeveloped. But I haven't really done any landscaping there. The real landscaping is, I guess, between the front yard and the backyard, it's about 2 acres.
Okay. And one of the questions was back to the mycorrhizia. How do you say that?
Mycorrhiza.
Mycorrhiza. The Roundup, you said Roundup kills it. And the question was, is that certain? What is it doing?
No, it's really, that's my speculation. So the only thing that I can tell you is that in my own experience, whenever I sprayed Roundup, the weeds came back, more than ever. So like I could never really get the weeds under control until I had more native plants that were kind of growing in that area that are interlocking roots. And from what I've read and my own experience, that when the mycorrhiza, which can only grow in the plant roots really,
yes,
gets into that soil, that's what prevents the weeds from growing. And every natural area that I have now, including the back property where I've got established native plants, I don't have to weed anymore.
That's a dream come true.
It doesn't.
So one of the questions is, does it make sense to group deep or wide-rooted natives near shallow-rooted natives to help the shallow-rooted natives survive. Just kind of.
Absolutely. I absolutely think that. And I'd say like what I've seen is coast live oak. There's no plant that's like a coast live oak. It's like a keystone species in a plant environment. When you put in a few coast live oaks, they make the entire garden so much healthier because they put their roots way out. They are spreading mycorrhiza out really broadly. They're bringing water from lateral water sources. They're bringing it up from deeper water sources. Everything gets a little bit more green, a little more verdant, a little happier and healthier when you have a few oaks that are kind of spread out through the environment. The problem with oaks is that they create a lot of shade, and so you got to be careful about where you put them. That you want the smaller plants that need sun to be on the south side of those, and then also you want to have more, the shade loving plants that are on the north side or kind of under the oaks.
Perfect. Do you have to replenish the water in the pond restoration thing because of evaporation, or do you just rely on rainfall?
I do have to replenish it. So it seems to replenish it, it seems to evaporate about as fast as it did when it was just a pool. So there's more shade, so that helps. But I'm sure the plants are pulling water out just because the roots are using water. It hasn't seemed to make a difference. The water bill is just about exactly the same as it was though when it was a pool.
Okay. What vine is growing over your garage doors?
Those are desert grapes.
Oh.
Vitis iridiana, I believe is the scientific name, but they're they take some work. Of all the plants that I have, I think those are some of the ones that I spend more time with because I have to cut them back every year, or they just get too big and they'll take over everything. So I do have to prune and trim the grapevines more than just about any other plant that I have, but I still like them.
The plant filtered fountain, somebody's wanting to know if you have recommended sources for learning about that subject.
I don't, but there are some forums for pool to pond conversion. I can find out if you send me the email of the person that would like some more information. I'll get some pool to pond forum URLs that I can send them. That's what I use. And I think the concept is basically the same, whether you're dealing with a pool to pond conversion or a fountain to pond conversion.
Okay. The question is about sycamores for a medium fast growing tree that's not in the sycamore family. So it's not about sycamores.
Yeah. Medium to fast growing tree.
Yep.
Well, I'm a huge fan of oaks. Oaks are wonderful. I would say a coast live oak would probably be the easiest medium. It's kind of, it'll get to 20 feet, 30 feet pretty quickly. It's not a huge tree. And if you if it's near water, it can stretch its roots out the water. It'll grow pretty quickly. It'll grow at least a foot a year. My oaks, I don't provide them any water, any direct water at all, and they're in some fairly, most of them are in fairly dry soil. They still grow almost a foot a year.
Okay. Are cultivars as good as natives for attracting bees, bugs, and birds?
I don't know the answer to that. I think I've heard people say that they are. I'm not sure about it. I think basically whenever you're dealing something which is not purely natural, you just got to say, I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. My biggest problem with cultivars is they died so quickly. My second biggest one is they didn't really look like nature, but they died so quickly that I was never really able to get to a balanced ecosystem. So I never really saw many insects at all when it was mostly just cultivars. I saw very few butterflies, for example.
Is there soil, dirt, sand in the pond, or just rock?
There's a couple areas where I just shoveled in some dirt, so there's a fair amount of dirt, but not very much at all. For the most part, the plants that are, well, okay, actually, let me back up. I have cattails, and I have California reed, California rush, California bulrush, and those are in big pots. So they have soil that's in big pots, but still the roots kind of just explode out of the pots. So there's a lot of exposed roots that are going outside of the soil and are filtering the water. That area you saw that's kind of in the front of the rocks that has all those yellow flowers, that's on a platform made of PVC netting, and those are just hanging there. So they have no soil. They just suck up all the moisture from the, or they just hang their roots out, and they're able to, do a whole lot of filtering. I do the same thing with the, I have, what do you call it? Spiny rushes, or light spiny rushes. Those are also in pots or just in areas where I've made a dirt area. So they have some dirt, but they're also.
Well, the final total is 126 members.
Excuse me, I think
So that's where we're at.
iPhone needs to mute.
We're not getting more members coming in at this
Oh,
point.
yes. So
Mute. Thanks. What kind of soil do you have in Poway? Just is it clay? Granite?
I have all different kinds of soil. So I have some clay. I have some really good loamy sort of soil. I have sandy soil. I've got decomposed granite. What I've found is that the soil doesn't really matter that much. I see the same thing on my mountain biking trips as I go through all different kinds of soil, really rich soil, white sandy soil. You see all kinds of plants that have very, really healthy sort of ecosystems in the worst soil and the best soil. So I don't think this kind of soil matters that much. What really matters is drainage, though. So if you've got clay and it's flat and it's not going to drain very well, you're probably going to you need to find plants that can handle poor drainage, because a lot of plants are going to die. Most of the ceanothus plants, just lots of them, they're going to grow on hillside. So clay on hillside is going to be okay. Sand on hillside is okay, but clay on a poorly draining non-slope or flat, it's going to be a big problem. So look for drainage, and be careful about that. But other than that, native plants can handle all different kinds of soils, and some of the ugliest, poorest looking soil you can ever imagine are just fine for California natives.
The plant filtered fountain still has a pump, right?
Yes. Yeah. So the plant filter fountain, they both do. The pond and the fountain do have pumps. So you still need to move water around. So if the water is just sitting there, it's never going to flow through the plant roots. So I still, the water, I still have my skimmer. So all the water is being sucked in through the skimmer. It goes down to the area that used to be a filter, but now it's not filtered. It just comes right back up to rocks behind those rocks that are behind the pool. And then another area that's kind of the side of the pool, and just flows down. So the water is moving through the plants quite a bit, but it's not being filtered by a mechanical filter.
Got it. How long did it take for your native plants to settle in?
Well, I had so many different false starts. Once I started planting just the local natives that are really native to Poway, maybe 3 years, before it started to really, everything seemed started getting easy, where I stopped having to worry about watering the plants by hand, because that is kind of one of the tricky parts, where until the mycorrhiza gets into the soil, you've got to really baby the plants a little bit. And so you might have to water them pretty close to directly, the first couple of years, even 3 years. But within 3 years, the roots were big, the roots were deep, they were kind of locked in, so I didn't really have to water them at all anymore. Now it's just the easiest thing in the world. I don't have to water plants ever directly. I add new plants if I am going to add them before the rains, and even in a bad year like this, I never have to water them at all. They'll just lock into the root system of the other plants, and they do fine without getting any supplemental irrigation, even if they're new plants. But I would say, yeah, that's probably a good rule of thumb is that you'll have a kind of the plants will be mature enough and the roots will be deep enough and connected enough after maybe 3 years for you to almost forget about it.
That's great. The gosh, there's so many questions here. My brain's exploding. Please repeat, what were the plants used in that plant filtered fountain?
Okay, I'll give you the plant. Okay, so the plants that in the plant filtered fountain were Marsh Pennywort, and those are the ones with the big circle leaves. They're really kind of pretty, and they're very, they're tough. So Marsh Pennywort, I put in maidenhair ferns, which are really cool, I think, and seep monkey flower, which are the ones that have the beautiful yellow flowers. Another couple that you can put in that I think are really neat are what is it? What is that plant? Scarlet monkey flower, which creates a really beautiful red flower. It's also aquatic sort of a plant. And aquilarium, I can't remember the full species name, but it's also a really pretty plant that requires a lot of different moisture. You can also go to Calscape, and if you want other ideas, there's an option called Bog Plants. And so Bog Plants it's a perfect kind of plants for a fountain.
Yeah. Robin is one of our tree arborists, and she wants to mention that Coastline Oak can get really huge. And for people who cannot convert a yard to entirely native soil and plants, the desert willow tree, cultivars that are seedless, will bloom for 6 months. She has a timeless beauty, which is simply awesome for hummingbirds, songbirds, and butterflies. So she wanted people to know about that desert willow.
Yeah, it's a beautiful plant.
Yeah, truly. Okay, so if you were planting new natives, how do you recommend they get watered in year 1 versus year 3? So do you just stop after year 3?
That's a very good question. And so what I do is if you're dealing with like a new landscape, like starting from scratch, then I think it's fine to irrigate it a little bit more broad, just do regular irrigation for the first year. And so right after you plant it, I do it like for maybe 5 or 6 minutes twice a week. So you really got to get them locked in. If you plant it in the winter, in the beginning of the winter, right before the rainy season, you might not have to water it at all, for that rainy season, depending on the amount of rain, but you have to keep the soil kind of moist. And as time goes by, you want to do less watering and deeper. So, for the first month or so, keep it quite wet. So what I tell people that are planting plants when there's no rain, twice a week for about 5 or 6 minutes. And then after a month, go to once a week for 10 minutes. And then after 3 months, once a month for 20 minutes or so. And then second year, see how it is, depending how good the roots have gone or how far the roots are gone. Maybe once a month for 20 minutes or so, again, in the dry part of the season. And then by the third year, hopefully you don't have to. You're not going to do any direct irrigation at all after that. It still is a good idea, I think, to have those indirect water. Those indirect water sources, because plants just love those things. There's really no danger. So if they can reach their roots out 3 feet, 6 feet to either a natural or a simulated riparian area, that's just going to make them happy. So I think that's a good way good way to do it, depending on the setup and the size of your yard. But indirect irrigation is always good for California native plants. Almost always.
If somebody wants to find a consultant on this kind of changing a garden this way, how do they go about finding a consultant for this kind of restoration gardening?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, to tell you the truth. Because you know, the people that I know that are consultants, they tend to be more. I mean, most people like the pretty flowers, you know, so they tend to favor the cultivars, and they're less likely to be involved in biomimicry sort of solutions. But I would check out the CNPS San Diego site. I know they have a lot of different resources there. I haven't looked at them in a while, but I would guess that they're going to have some recommendations for people that could be consultants.
Can the oh gosh, where'd it go? The questions are so fast in here. Oh my gosh. Hold on. Oh, can that plant filtered fountain take full sun?
Yes, it can. Most of the riparian plants love full sun. So it's actually harder to find ones that like shade. So a maidenhair fern is going to like shade, but all the other ones that I mentioned, the more sun they can get, the better. They'll look a little weedy if it's shady.
Wonderful. Okay, I think I asked all the questions. I'm sorry, you guys, if I didn't. But wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'm glad you like it. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to share what I've learned over the years with you, and I hope it's useful to you.